In Book 2, Section 5 of Consolation of Philosophy, Lady Philosophy begins to offer the stronger remedies that she had promised earlier. Boethius has now received and benefited from the palliative dose of philosophy, of truth about himself, and his condition is stabilized. Now she's going to begin bringing him back to full mental health by giving him stronger and stronger doses of truth, things that he wasn't able to face before, that he'll be able to face now and improve by having faced. So she says, suppose that everything I've said just now about the transitory nature of the goods of fortune were not true. Suppose that fortune never took back the gifts that she gave you. Suppose that you could keep them all permanently. She says, even in that case, you would have to acknowledge that the goods of fortune in themselves are worthless. And to show this, she walks Boethius through 5 different specific types of worldly goods that he, or a man in his social position, might be attached to. First, she takes up the question of wealth. Consider wealth. Wealth, she says, is more enjoyed in the spending than in the getting. That is to say, we gain pleasure by spending our wealth, by giving it away to others in exchange for what they give us, and we gain honor or praise by donating our wealth, by being liberal with our wealth in generously donating to other people. That also means giving it away. So it seems that wealth is a good that we enjoy by giving it away to others so that we always have less than when we started. She also notes that if one man hoarded all the wealth in the world, he would not gain by it at all. He'd have nowhere to spend it. We can think of different kinds of desert island or science fiction scenarios where somebody has all the gold and nothing to exchange it for, no people to transact with. And this is taken, I think, to indicate that wealth is not a true good because it's connected with these social interactions, which are what we truly value. We truly value the exchange and the goods that we exchange for wealth, not the wealth itself. The second example she takes up is jewels. Jewels, she says, beautiful stones, are not really worthy of our admiration. There is a kind of beauty to them of a lower type, but their admirable quality does not transfer to their owners. And what admirable quality they have is still inferior to human excellence and human virtue, which is what rational people do and should admire more than the beauty of jewels. Next, consider the beauty of the countryside. You might think a man who has a beautiful country house with large estate around it might take pride in the beauty of his lands. And she says, these are beautiful, but they're not yours. That is to say, you are, as it were, kind of trying to pretend that this beautiful trees and rolling hills and pastures are somehow connected to you or a reflection of you, but they're ultimately not yours at all. And she says something important in this section. Let me read it to you here really quickly. On the bottom of page 44 and the top of page 45, she says, why are you so fascinated with these things, and why do you embrace them as if they were your own? Fortune will never give you what nature has intended otherwise. That's an important quote. Let's pause over that for a moment. Fortune will never give you what nature has intended otherwise. In other words, if your nature is such that you have or don't have certain things, certain goods, fortune is not going to undo that or to reverse it. Fortune can't override your nature. So it's a kind of vanity, a kind of playing with the tempting but deceptive promises of fortune for you to imagine that somehow you are lord over all of this land, or somehow your possessions give you something that you don't already have by nature. So this turn towards nature and towards rationality and towards recognizing the truth about one's nature and rationality is going to be an important theme in this entire work. The fourth and fifth things that Lady Philosophy takes up, she deals with in just one paragraph. Clothes, she says, you have beautiful clothes. She says very well, I admire your tailor, but not necessarily you. And servants. If you have excellent servants, she says, first off, servants are often more trouble than they're worth. But even if your servants were excellent and honest and not in any way troublesome to you, this would not be to your credit. It would show that your servants are excellent servants, but you, as the employer or owner of excellent servants, would not in any way be raised up or be of any higher quality than you were before. And what's common to all of these, she says on page 45, is that none of these things is yours, ultimately. The quote is again important to mark, middle of page 45. So all those things which you enjoy turn out to have nothing to do with you. None of these goods is yours. I think one way to think about the lesson that's going on in this part of the Consolation is we're being invited, along with Boethius, to reflect on the difference between things that are mine and things that are not mine. And it's going to turn out that my possessions are fundamentally not mine. For things that are truly my own, I'm going to need to look inside. I need to look at virtue and knowledge and wisdom and human excellence. That's going to be part of the consolation of philosophy, is recognizing what is my own and then attaching the proper value to it, and also recognizing the things that I try to pretend really are mine, but which are not. Things like wealth and clothing and servants and jewels and my beautiful land around my country estate. None of those things truly belongs to me, says Lady Philosophy. In the second half of chapter 5, Lady Philosophy turns to another issue. She asks Boethius, what is it that you really want when you pile up possessions, when you engage in this kind of elaborate pretend, when you imagine that you own something that you don't actually own? And she says it's security. You want security, but in acquiring possessions, you become less secure. Once you have possessions, you have to defend the possessions against robbers. You have to maintain them. You have to worry about how they compare to other people's possessions. As a rational person, she says, you don't need these things in order to be happy. And she even suggests that, in fact, your creator, God, wants something more for you than for you to be enslaved to your possessions and always thinking about them. Then she turns towards the end of this chapter to the need for self-remembrance. Okay, the way out of this for Boethius and for us is going to be this great philosophical goal of self-knowledge. And for a man like Boethius, who once had this self-knowledge, it's going to be self-remembering. If a man forgets himself, he forgets what he is, he becomes, Lady Philosophy says, lower than the beasts. A man, a rational being who has forgotten what he is, who has forgotten his rationality, forgotten his higher destiny, he's lower than the beasts that never even had that higher rationality to live up to. And I think Lady Philosophy is telling us here that we have a very high bar to clear in rationality. There are very high expectations that our rational nature sets for us. We have to struggle to live up to them. We have to be very deliberate and very focused about this. Lady Philosophy then gives her famous argument that riches are not good for us. She says riches are often harmful, and therefore they're not good. Nothing that's harmful can be good, ultimately. We may talk about this argument in more detail later, but we should note at the very least that it requires the premise that all good things do good for us and not harm. We might think of what Socrates said about justice. Justice never harms us. Lady Philosophy is saying something similar here. If a thing is good, we'll recognize that it's good by the fact that it's always beneficial to us and never harmful to us. And wealth and riches are not like that. They are sometimes helpful, but oftentimes they're harmful and we're worse off for having had them. That's going to tell us that we haven't arrived at the kind of good we're really seeking with this rational philosophical inquiry. The final poem of this chapter is an elaborate praise of the simple life of the past. And this should remind us perhaps of Plato's Simple City from Book 2 of the Republic, as contrasted to the luxurious city. And I think it also helps to remind us that one of Boethius's points here expressed through Lady Philosophy is that our desire for possessions and our attachment to our possessions is pitting us against our nature and against reason, against philosophical reason and proper self-understanding. So there's going to be a movement away from worldly goods, away from external goods, more towards these internal goods and self-knowledge connected with our nature and rational self-knowing. That's the end of my commentary on Book 2, Section 5 of the Consolation of Philosophy. Thanks for watching today. Goodbye.